Before diving into this incredible story, remember to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Here, every story has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. Rain fell in thin curtains on the city's cobblestones, reflecting the red and blue neon lights of the police cars. In the damp night, 38-year-old police officer David Marston walked briskly. He had already had a long day, and his mind was filled with prejudices he believed were justified by his experience. His eyes fell on a plainly dressed black man, walking calmly along the sidewalk, his gaze fixed on his phone. An irrational thought flashed through his mind: this man must be suspicious. Without thinking, David activated his siren and got out of his car, handcuffing the man with a mixture of arrogance and certainty. The man did not resist. He raised his eyes, calm and deep, and spoke in a soft but firm voice. "You know, you could get into trouble for that." David smiled contemptuously. "Well, it will be your word against mine. And believe me, I enforce the law." But at that moment, he was unaware of a truth that would change his life forever. The man he was holding was not just any citizen. He was Marcus Delaney, the head of internal affairs for the police, responsible for monitoring abuses by his colleagues, investigating misconduct, and ensuring that justice was never compromised. As David filled out his report, Marcus said nothing, letting him sink deeper into his error. Then, calmly, Marcus said, "Inspector Marston, you have just made a serious mistake." David's heart froze. He recognized that voice, that imposing presence despite the man's calm demeanor. Fear rose within him, replaced by panic. He had just fallen into the most dangerous trap of his career, one that no badge could protect him from. And in that rainy night, the policeman realized that this arrest, motivated by prejudice, would not only destroy his reputation, but perhaps his entire career. The next morning, the police station was bustling with the usual comings and goings of officers, but for David Marston, the world seemed to have frozen. He relived the previous day's arrest over and over again. Every image, every gesture of Marcus Delaney haunted his thoughts. In the Internal Affairs office, Marcus was already waiting for him. Seated behind his desk, calm and impeccably dressed, he observed David with a mixture of patience and cold determination. There was neither anger nor hatred in his gaze, only the quiet authority of someone who knows he is in control. David entered hesitantly, his badge gleaming under the office's artificial light. He tried to speak confidently. "Marcus. I didn't know." Marcus raised a hand, interrupting her with a soft but icy voice. "You knew perfectly well what you were doing, David. And deep down, you knew that you had judged a man without evidence, simply by the color of his skin." David's blood ran cold. Every word was a skillful accusation, every pause a silent weapon. He stammered. I just thought that you." Marcus stood up slowly. Every movement was measured, commanding immediate respect. "You were wrong. And you're going to have to face the consequences." Then, calmly, he took out a file and placed it in front of David. Images, reports, and even videos from the previous day showed the arrest from a neutral, unflinching perspective. David realized with horror that Marcus didn't need any anger to confront him with his guilt. The simple truth was enough. "Do you understand now, David," Marcus concluded, "that your career could be over before you even have a chance to understand your mistake?" David nodded, unable to utter a word. For the first time, he felt vulnerable. The man he had thought weak yesterday was now the master of his own destiny. And in the heavy silence of the office, a painful lesson had just dawned on him: racism wasn't just unjust, it could be fatal for those who let it guide their actions. The following days were a true nightmare for David Marston. Every move, every decision was now scrutinized. Officers whispered behind his back, some smiling maliciously, others shaking their heads in disapproval. News of his wrongful arrest spread quickly, but no one knew exactly who had been arrested. Marcus Delaney, for his part, remained a silent ghost in the police station. Always impeccable, always calm, he let the system do its work. But behind this calmness lay a meticulous strategy. He wanted David to understand the magnitude of his actions, not through gratuitous public humiliation, but through truth and accountability. One morning, David received a call. Marcus asked him to come to his office. Trembling, David entered. Marcus closed the door behind him and simply said, "David, we're going to review what happened. Every gesture, every word, every prejudice that you allowed to guide your actions." On the screen in front of them, images of the arrest played, this time from a completely neutral perspective. No detail had been omitted: the fear in the eyes of the arrested man, the rising panic in David, and above all, the contrast between David's arrogance and Marcus's imposing calm. "Do you see now, David?" Marcus asked firmly. "You haven't just broken the law, you've betrayed your own badge. You've jeopardized your career, your reputation, and for what? For a judgment based on the color of a man's skin?" David nodded, ashamed. He understood that nothing could erase this moment, but that how he reacted next would determine the rest of his professional life. Marcus, seeing the acceptance in his eyes, added, "There is still a chance to correct your mistakes, but it will require courage, humility, and a willingness to change. Do you understand that?" David nodded again, more determined at that moment than ever before in his life. But he knew the road ahead would be long, strewn with accusing glances, rumors, and a constant reminder that his hasty judgment had almost destroyed everything. Marcus silently returned to his files, leaving David alone with his thoughts. In this solitude, David realized the inescapable truth: justice was not a matter of force or arrogance, but of respect and responsibility. David Marston entered the police station that morning with a strange feeling, a mixture of fear, humiliation, and, for the first time in a long time, respect for Marcus Delaney. He knew that every step he took would be watched, evaluated, and that every decision could either repair or worsen his already fragile reputation. Marcus was waiting for him in the training room, surrounded by a few officers chosen to witness what would be an exercise in reflection and accountability. It wasn't a public punishment, but a subtle lesson, to make David understand, through experience, the impact of his prejudices and actions. "Today," Marcus began in a calm but authoritative voice, "you will review your own decisions through the lens of justice. You will understand what a simple act can provoke in someone, and how the law must remain neutral, regardless of your personal feelings." David listened intently, feeling each word as a sting of reality. Marcus guided him through various simulated scenarios, confronting David with situations where his prejudiced reflexes could have caused irreversible damage. Each simulation demonstrated the real-world impact of his decisions on the lives of others. At one point, Marcus looked David straight in the eyes. "Do you now see why what you did was unacceptable?" David lowered his head, unable to respond immediately. He felt the weight of his mistakes like never before. He understood that redemption would not come from mere apologies or superficial reports. It required deep introspection, a real commitment to change and to protect justice, even when no one was watching. After several hours of exercises and discussions, Marcus placed a hand on David's shoulder. "There is still hope for you. But remember, every action counts, every decision is watched, and trust is earned slowly. Today is your first step. Don't waste it." David left the room, transformed. Fear and shame were still present, but they were now accompanied by a glimmer of hope. He knew that Marcus Delaney would remain a silent but constant authority in his life, guiding his actions and preventing him from repeating his past mistakes. For the first time, David understood that the true strength of a police officer lies not in arrogance or power, but in justice, respect, and humility. A few weeks later, an alert sounded at the police station. An armed robbery had just been reported at a jewelry store downtown. David Marston and his team were immediately dispatched to the scene. His heart was pounding, but he also felt a new inner clarity. Every step, every decision would now be guided by justice, not by fear or prejudice. Upon arriving at the scene, David noticed a black man with his hands raised, who seemed frightened but completely innocent. An old reflex might have led him to suspect him, but this time, he took a step back, breathing deeply and calmly assessing the situation. "Inspector Marston," a voice called in his ear. It was Marcus, who had arrived discreetly to oversee the scene. David nodded almost imperceptibly, sensing his silent mentor behind him. David spoke, his voice firm but fair. "Stay calm. Show me your hands. You're not in danger if you cooperate." The man obeyed immediately. David signaled to his team to detain the other suspect, a real thief who had just left with a bag full of jewelry. The black man had no connection to the crime, and David recognized him instinctively. For the first time, he had let reason and observation guide his actions, not his prejudices. Marcus approached at that precise moment, placing a hand on David's shoulder. "Do you see what it means to properly administer justice? That's what it means to be a real police officer." David smiled, a mixture of relief and pride. He had just put into practice everything he had learned: humility, respect, patience, and neutrality in the face of appearances. The black man was released immediately, unharmed, while the real criminal was arrested. In the silence that followed, Marcus murmured, "It's a start, David. Always remember, your actions define your badge, and your choices define your honor." David knew he could never forget Marcus's lessons. He had been confronted with his own arrogance and prejudices, and had survived the ordeal with a new understanding. From now on, every arrest, every intervention, every decision would be guided by a single truth: justice does not discriminate, and neither does a true police officer. And as the sirens wailed in the distance, David Marston felt that he had just crossed an invisible line, the one that separates ignorance from responsibility, and fear from true strength.